Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental nerds, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Nic and I talk about leadership qualities. We talk to Mike Rega about social and psychological aspects of business, the power of your network, and the politics of business. And finally, Nic read an article about the perils of de-extinction recently. So here's some fun facts about the dodo. They were flightless, stood around 3 feet tall, and weighed up to 45 pounds. That hence flightless. They used to live on the island of Mauritius and were basically big pigeons. Thank you for that, Nic. Everyone send him a message and tell him how much you loved that fact. Hit that music. All right, today is the last day to submit an abstract for the 2024 NAEP annual conference in case you needed a reminder. And everybody save the date for May 5th through 8th. It will be held in Minneapolis. You know, I am a big fan. Looking forward to that. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode, head on over to environmentalprofessionalsradio.com/sponsor and check out the options there and submit that form. Now let's get to our segment.
I don't know, Laura. What for you, what makes a good leader? I think there's a lot of, it's a really broad question and there's a lot of ways we could go with it, but where do you want to start?
Oh, you know me. I hate the word leader.
Yeah.
I hate when people are like, I'm a leader. I don't think that you are a leader. You do something and you lead. It's, do your thing, do it well, and people will follow.
Right.
The notion of I'm going to be a great leader someday just rubs me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Because it's already discounting everyone else helping you get to where you are.
Yeah, kind of. And not intentionally or outright, but I think you can kind of miss the mark if you're oh, I'm a great leader, but you're not considering are you a great communicator? Are you a great mentor? Are you, those are all things that are wrapped up into leadership.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's funny you say it that way. I think there's lots of different examples you can pull from, right? And one of the simplest for the military, for example, is they'll say things like, we're going to go up this hill, come with me, right? It is a better way to lead than you guys go take that hill, And I think that speaks to your point, right? Where it's you have to be forward thinking and you have to make good decisions, because, if you make bad decisions and everyone gets wiped out, then there's no leadership left because you're gone. Right. Quite literally. So yeah, sometimes it's luck too. And I think we forget that, even great leaders can make bad decisions, or people who are in charge and all that. So it happens,
Yeah. But to that point, a good leader, when they make a mistake, recognizes it, acknowledges it, takes the blame, and then makes up for it. Not even just oops, sorry. It's, what can I do to make this right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you come into a new position as well, I think there's good and bad ways to approach that. And most good leaders will lean on the people that have been there for years, learn their strengths and how the team dynamics, and then work on where do we need to go from here. But if you just go in there, guns blazing, to pardon the phrase, and just be well, this is what we're doing and I'm doing it this way and this is the way I am. It's kind of an old coaching mentality as well. It's working with the crew that you have, not the ones that you wish you had. And sometimes people get caught up in, I'm the system. I'm the reason that this works. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It's because of me. And those are the ones that usually fail.
Yeah. I actually had a boss who, his boss retired and then he took over and then went to a meeting and just said, my team this, my team that. And he got berated.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, you just stepped into this role. So it's not your team yet.
Right.
And even if it was it's our team, the team, us, we, not I created this team and then they went out and did my bidding.
Right. Exactly. It's really easy to get wrapped up in your own ego when it comes to leadership sometimes. And, if you do well, if you are doing well and your group is doing well, it's easy to do. I remember we've talked about bad advice before. The guy who was you could be an asshole and it's fine because they'll forgive you. They have to, or whatever it was. It was just a terrible way to be. I'm that's bad leadership, because something goes wrong, none of those people are going to help you. None.
Yeah.
Zero.
And that's it. You're not a leader without followers. So, and that doesn't mean Like I love Turn the Ship Around is one of my favorite books. And he talks about the leader model. It's not about, they're not followers. They're just other leaders,
Right.
That are
Right.
just situated around you differently and like always learning. I think probably that's for a leader, a good, you ask about what are good traits for a leader. You never is just stopped. You're always learning and trying to be better the next day.
Yeah.
If you've just decided like, I've made it, now I'm the director and I stay here. I'm not going to trainings. I'm not trying to improve myself. That isn't leadership either.
No. And it's easy to sometimes to plateau. I think in lots of careers that happens. And, including my own, I've also done that a couple of times. And you're just kind of sitting there going through the motions. Things are all good. They're fine. You're not rocking boats. And then you start getting a little bit bored. And then, you can even start to head down instead of going back up. And, your goals and where you want to be all matter to that as well. But it is easy to kind of forget to be curious or to stay curious. So, I don't know. That's a pretty big one for me. And it's Ted Lasso for anyone who watches it. There you go. Be curious. It's a good leadership call.
Yeah. Well, our guest is leadership and persuasive communication all day long. So
Okay.
I think we can bring him on and get some more answers.
All right. Sounds great.
Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Mike Rega, managing partner of the Ecliptic Consulting Group, on the show. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Welcome. I appreciate it.
It's nice to finally have you on the show. I've been working with you for a couple of years now, and I think this is going to be great. Talk about some leadership stuff. And before we get into leadership stuff, let's talk about your career path and how you got started with ECG.
Yeah, that was almost sort of by mistake. I was working for Stryker Medical back in the day, and they make hips and knees and all the kinds of things that you really don't want in your body. They're great if you need it, but if you don't, then it's not something you want coming down the pike. So I was there launching what they call the Stryker cot, which these big football players ride around on and things when they get injured. And my roommate for the meeting got laryngitis, so they stuck me on stage last minute, which I really didn't know anything about the cot. I was just his roommate, so I saw it, and I heard him chat about it a little bit. And I got up on stage and did my thing, and people seemed to like it. But in the audience was a man by the name of Maynard Garfield, and he was one of the founders of ECG, Ecliptic Group. And he came up to me afterwards and said, hey, if you ever want to get into consulting, whatever, give me a shout, and give me his card. And I thought, wow, who the heck would want to be a consultant? I'm a medical professional here, and then about 6 months later, Stryker went through a massive layoff and laid off about half of us. So
Oh, wow.
I dug out his card, and that's
Right.
needless to say, and that's how the whole thing started, with a strange connection through a national meeting.
I love it. Strange connections.
Yeah.
What does ECG do then? Let's go there.
Yeah, well, it's been a journey, like many people in consulting. Just the nature of consulting is client says, do you do that? And you say yes, and then you figure it out later. So throughout time, it has been wildly different things. The firm was formed in 1958, and if you can imagine, business in 1958 was wildly different. Those of you who are fans of like Mad Men and things, I would imagine that's what it was like.
Right.
But as you move through time, it was very much connection between sort of the social aspects and the psychological aspects to business. And that seems common today with all the books of Daniel Pink and things, but it was very uncommon in the late 50s and early 60s. So we started in the realm of sales training, sales development, combining those two sciences of marketing and psychology. And through time, that has evolved dramatically, and we're much more focused on global STEM companies and talent like that, and only play in a couple of sectors, so built environment and EHS, the environmental world, and then in tech. And today we do everything from leadership development is one of our big areas, and also within strategy consulting. So many of these consultancies are amazingly smart people with no real strategy on where to go and what to do. So that's the focus. We grew from a 1958 sales development to today's world of strategy and leadership development.
Yeah, that's great. And I like the candidness about that. Like, consulting, you got to shift and change as the needs change, right? But you're here because you work with a lot of environmental firms. So, Can you give us a little insight into like what they are specifically struggling with and what they come to you for?
Yeah. And, you don't want to be too negative on these firms because they have been wildly successful across the spectrum from the SLRs to the Rambles to the Environs, the ERMs of the world, et cetera. And the way they grew up, really, this business was born in the 70s with the Clean Water Act, et cetera. And It was engineers that really started saying, hey, hang on a second, clients are calling us and asking us for things that we have no idea what they're talking about half the time, but they're under these new regulations. They want to stay in compliance, et cetera. So the businesses grew up very much like that with engineering, which traditionally don't make amazing managers. And so we come in and we say, hang on a second, can we help shape what you are and what you do, from strategy to building proper teams, and then a major focus on the commercial aspect or business development, whatever you want to call it, depending on the firm. Because the other thing you'll find out about STEM people is that's not typically their comfort zone. They're not wonderfully comfortable face to face with clients. And you realize pretty quickly in a career, wow, that's the whole business. I mean, there's lots of smart people out there. It's the client side that really makes a difference in your overall career.
Yeah, totally. That's Nic and I talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
And Nic, I'll let you take over from here. Ask some questions.
I literally, there's meetings, and I literally just had a meeting where some of my teammates asked me what our dress code is. I'm like, don't wear ties. I know the person who's running the meeting. He hates wearing ties. So if we show up without ties, he'll take his off. And that is exactly what happened. And it was so great, as I was really nervous because he was wearing it. And then he's like, hey, they're not wearing ties. I don't have to wear this thing. And he just threw it down. And I was like, okay, that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Like that client thing, having an understanding of how people are. And I mean, our meeting went great. It really did.
Yeah.
Because of something like that.
I think when you get most engineering, science-backed people in a dark room and with the truth meter turned to 10, they will tell you they're most comfortable alone working on really intricate, hard problems. Right. They're most uncomfortable in front of a group of people talking to them about why that problem needs to be solved. And by the way, we're going to charge you for it. That would be the spectrum of comfort to discomfort. Right, we sit in the middle of that. We say, hey, hang on. Not every one of you needs to take this track towards a commercial and client-facing role, but a certain number of you have to. Otherwise, there is no firm. There's the business books are littered with wonderful, really smart people who couldn't talk to a client and just cratered the firm.
Yeah. Well, how do you find people that do that? What do you look for when you're meeting with leadership?
Yeah, we try to catch them early. So some of this, frankly, is born. Some of it is sort of family. Did you sit down together and have dinner with your parents? Did you have a crazy uncle that you were always talking with? Or maybe were you isolated in a situation where you just didn't have that much interaction, so you were more, buried in a book concept? And so some of that, frankly, is born. But these skills can be taught. One of the classic stories is somebody asked me one time if you can learn this stuff, really. And I said, well, yeah. And he said, I don't think so. And I said, Doug, I said, do you snow ski? He said, yeah. I said, were you born a snow skier? He said, no, not at all. I said, snow skiing's damn hard.
Yeah.
He said, yeah. I said, okay, so that skill set can be learned, but somehow talking to clients and having commercial acumen is not. And that's sort of adjusted him. And is it easy? Are there people that are much natural on a snowboard or snow ski? Of course.
Yeah.
But those skills can be learned. So how we find them is a little bit of a filtering between, hey, do you have natural acumen as far as speaking to people? Do you have some leadership skills that bubble up? And the firms that we work with then start to select those people to be in our LDP's leadership development programs. And then we put the polish on them and everything like that. So a little bit self-selection, a little bit born that way, and then a lot of training.
So what does the training look like then? How do you dive in?
Yeah. So we start with a pretty in-depth needs analysis, because one of the death knells in any of these LDP's leadership development programs is you either start way too low And the people in the room are saying, yeah, I learned this stuff, from BSMJ 15 years ago. What the hell?
Right.
Or you start too high and they look at you and go, I can't do that. So you have to target that content beginning with your audience. So we do quick interviews with everybody that are going to be in our sessions, and we ask them, without being aggressive, we say, what's your background? What do you do? What are you comfortable in? Those kind of things. And that gives us a pretty darn good look at the starting point. Mm-hmm. So our usual first phase is around what we call persuasive communication. And it is the ability to frame up an idea, to have a cogent argument about what it is that you want to do with said client or your team or whatever the case is. And then we run through usually 3 or 4 different sessions with them, usually 2 to 3 day live sessions. So they are on stage in front of each other, an instructor. This is not, hey, virtually you can learn a golf swing kind of concept. No. I'm sure you can learn a few things, but it's trial by fire. It's an intense process, and you see the behavioral change in real time.
Yeah. So, that's funny. We really did want to talk more about persuasive communication and what that means. So when you're telling the trial by fire, how do you set that up? How do you get people to walk through that and get that practice? Because I think for me, one of the hardest things to do is to practice something like this. How do you get a group of people to sit in a room and, have that be valuable to the company? Because that's the thing. No matter what, it takes time. Even if you have a group of people that will be willing to sit there and listen, how do you pull that all together?
Yeah, it's a great question. So after the interview, so we get a right content level start, let's just say. Mm-hmm. Then we sit with the client, and many times we have built the strategy for them about, hey, this is your go-to-market campaign. This is the areas of focus. These are the practice areas that you need to drop, and these are the areas that you need to focus. So we're pretty well versed in their strategy. And we bring those two things together, because the other death knell in these programs is, yeah, that was really good, and the instructor was interesting and funny, but it doesn't relate to us. So that's a killer. So now we've got the right content beginning, because we've done the interviews, and we understand the strategy because many times we wrote the strategy. Right. So we bring those two together. So immediately, Nick, we say, okay, these items are going to be valuable and relatable to you because they are you. We use their terminology. So we get through that. The second component of that is you have to build trust in the room, because these are smart people that are also massively skeptical. Right. They've seen way too many YouTube videos and Zig Ziglar, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Right. So they sit there and go, hey, what is this clown going to teach us? And that's a really good question. So we force the issue of trust. We force the issue of it's okay to mess up long before we get them by trial by fire. Those are the pieces. Am I relatable? Am I at the right level for this class? Am I going to learn something out of this? And do I feel comfortable in front of my peers trying these skills? When we have those building blocks put in place, then we can move forward. If not, you've probably all been to these sessions where you just sit there and you want to stab yourself in the eye with a spoon after 20 minutes. You're like, I cannot do this anymore.
Yeah, right. And it is funny. The willingness is really important. And I know that's something that, even in my groups, like I say, we have people who are really young, who are really that's one of the things we look for. It's like, okay, well, who's doing really well? How do we get them the experience they need to continue to do well? And, I think that what we call it, I was telling Laura, we call it soft skills, and maybe that's not the right term for it, but those are the hardest ones to practice. I think it's really hard to be like, okay, well, now that you've been here 2 years, go ahead and tell the client everything that I would say. Well, you seem to be scared. I don't understand, and so it's a really hard thing. So I commend you for it. It's not easy to do.
No, it's not easy to do, but with humor and you get to a point where these people can sort of make fun of each other, and that sets a feeling in the room. Yeah. We also do these by cohorts. So each time they go through, session 2, session 3, it's the same group of people. And there is a bonding process that takes place there. And by the second time where they've gone to dinner and they've had cocktails and everything, everybody asks about, hey, how's the dog doing or whatever. It's a different feeling in those rooms than sort of, I don't know, an American Management Association meeting where you have no idea who those other people are. Yeah. You sort of put on a face about your education level and your experience because other people are judging you in that room. And again, not to say anything about those are great content courses. It's just not what we do. And we find that if we can get those building blocks together and get those people to start taking chances, to your point, they are scared. They are intimidated.
Yeah.
One of the worst things to do is to have somebody, brilliant on stage like a Laura Thorne come off stage and say, "Okay, Jimmy, you're up next." And Jimmy hasn't said 2 words in 3 days. It's like he's going to be terrified. I got to follow her. And so it's setting that room where it's okay. It's going to be humorous. It's okay to fail. It's okay to mess up. We're all trying to get better. If you can set that, then they'll learn anything.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I want to relate that to, I know Laura's going to yell at me for saying sports, but I remember once playing softball and I was late, right? I was late for the game. The game was about to start. I ran out to second base. I ran out there, didn't warm up, right? Very first hit is right to me. And I took that ball and I launched it into outer space because I hadn't bothered to warm up, right? My arm was tight and I just sailed it off into, I'm pretty sure it never came down. That's how far away I threw it. But if I had warmed up, that wouldn't have been an issue, right? And it's funny you say that because we don't think about that when it comes to communication and in talking in front of a group of people. I think that's a really, really important point. You can't just show up and walk out on stage, if you haven't said a word to anyone in 3 days. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Without grossing out your audience or anything, we call that in our firm, show up and throw up. Where, what you've done? You've sat in the car or in virtual settings and you went over your PowerPoint 9 times and you went through, table 6, which they're going to really be interested in table 6. They're never interested in table 6. And then you get to that situation and you haven't practiced what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, how you're going to answer questions. What happens if you get a little pushback? How are you and I going to act to each other? And far as you've not done any of that. So of course you're going to launch it into the seats the first hard shot that you get. Of course you are.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. We sort of force those situations in a safe setting. And frankly, we push them to fail. We push them to the point where we want that situation, by the time they get to the 4th session, which is group persuasion, which is super intense, they're always on stage. By the time we get there, the trial by fire has happened so much that no client would put them through the same kind of things that we just did to them in a session. It feels like, hey, this is a breeze. I got this.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, I've been working with Mike, full disclosure, I've been working with Mike for a couple of years now, and I've gotten to see him work the room and lead these trainings. And he really does, after watching the cohorts get together a couple of times, they really, they're checking in with each other. They know each other's names. And these people work in different parts of the country. They don't see each other every day. So they're strangers when they start, most of them. They may have been in a meeting together or know each other's names, but they're getting to know each other on a personal level that they then leave the training with. And so they also have each other to lean on after the trainings. And it's really cool.
Well, when you think about that, look at it from the leadership of the firm, right? They're sending these 20, 25 people through an intensive program. And, they're sitting in their office, sitting there going, wait a minute, is this investment worth it? What are they going to learn? What's our ROI? Blah, blah, blah. But Laura, what you just said is, hang on a second. The bonds of that cohort that I would pick up the phone and call or get on a virtual call with somebody that I would never have to because I didn't know them. I saw their name on an email somewhere. If that happens one time with one client over the entire rest of their career, they have long since paid for that. And we know through our data that happens multiple times a month after these sessions. It's the glue that sticks these firms together. It's those kinds of cohort relationships. It's magic, frankly. And why firms don't do this on a universal basis is mind-boggling to us.
That's what I always thought.
Yeah.
No, it's funny though, because I think this has been kind of this is not a surprise for anyone who listens to the show, but one of the reasons I started doing stand-up comedy was to get better at public speaking. And I couldn't think of anything harder than that.
Right.
And maybe this is a healthier approach.
Well, Mike actually does a lot of comedy. He's not doing stand-up, but he definitely brings humor into the room.
But I'll say before you start, I would say one of the things that I learned is that you have to be prepared. Even if it's stand-up comedy and you're supposed to do a little bit of improv and riffing or whatever it is, you still have to be prepared. If you don't know your joke, it's not going to work. And I think that's true of any speech, right? If you don't know it, it doesn't matter how charming you are, it won't work.
Yeah. And I would imagine in the world of stand-up too, I mean, you can't get up in front of the Sarasota Seniors Club and start talking about TikTok, right? There's got to be something that, not to make any kind of ageism joke, but you've got to make sure that it's targeted to that audience. Otherwise, they don't find it interesting or funny. So what we get out of the interviews is everybody tells you something, a little bit of something. Stand-up comic, background in this. I have 4 dogs. I live on a farm, something. And that comes out in the sessions. We weave that into the discussions of the sessions. And then all of a sudden, sort of their ears perk up and they go, oh, that's my farm, in Manitoba or whatever the case is. It brings it live. And so much in the training and development world just doesn't. It's, hey, we're going to go through these 94 slides, and I know we have 2 hours.
Right.
No, it's, if you're going to do that, why don't you just email them to me, please?
Right. Yeah, it has the same value. Yeah. So, okay, I know I'm hogging the interview here a little bit, but I want to know too, because there's a couple of things that happen. I think sometimes when companies go through this program or these kinds of programs, they realize, there are people in leadership positions that maybe shouldn't be. So how do you approach that? Is that something that, everyone can be taught? So even people who are not good leaders can still learn and become good leaders? Or are there hard decisions that have to be made sometimes? And you say, maybe this isn't the place for this person. Do you guys talk through stuff like that? Or how do you kind of manage leaders who are really struggling at being those?
Yeah, we absolutely do. I mean, we are a consulting firm. It just so happens so much of the consulting that happens in our space have to do with people. We don't do much consulting in the automotive space, which, I don't know, maybe you're working on stamping machines and there's a problem there. You got to fix the stamping machine. Well, we don't have any stamping machines. We got a bunch of people. They happen to be really smart people, assertive people with usually low end communication skills, which makes it really, really interesting for us to maneuver through this. Yeah. So we say, Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great, talks about, do you have the right people on the bus, and do you have the right people in the right seats on the bus? And the answer to that in many situations is absolutely not.
Right.
So many times in these firms, they grew up because this particular person happened to be brilliant in air. And so they made her the national air leader because she really knows air.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that no one can stand to work for her. She's a tyrant, has never really built a team, but man, is she brilliant in air. So we made her the air practice lead. And what have you done to yourself?
Right.
So I would much rather have somebody who is not particularly brilliant in air, but builds an amazing team of people that really create a talent magnet for that firm than to have a tyrant run in the air practice. Not to mention any particular names, but Laura, you know exactly who I'm talking about. So, so with that said, yes, we go back to the leadership of the firm and we say, hey, there needs to be some reconfiguring here because artificially you are tamping down the growth of your firm. This person is valuable to the firm and in the wrong seat on the bus.
Right.
And so we make those suggestions. We don't have the power to make those moves, but many times they do.
Yeah, and I think it's a really fair point. I actually have one of my right hands for my job is not the foremost expert in what we do, but she is the best people manager I've met. And she's fantastic at it. She's like, I don't know all of the information here. I'm like, yeah, but you know every single player. You know how to help and support them without me having to ask you or tell you, hey, check on so-and-so. And that's so much more valuable for that position that she's in. I'm like, you could almost know nothing because the people skills that she has are so good. It's like you can learn the job, the technical part of the job at some point, but I need so much more that motivational piece.
Absolutely. And, if you look at sort of a graph of this and you say technical skills, leadership skills, time, there's a point early in your career where technical skills get you in. You have this degree and you've done all these, soil studies. So you're hired to do X. Great. You don't need much leadership skills because you're a taskmaster. You're out there collecting samples, blah, blah, blah. But as you move through time, suddenly leadership skills and technical skills in terms of importance cross over the top of each other. And what you're saying is when you get into the very top levels of an organization, leadership skills have a much more important component to your success than technical skills. Not to suggest that technical skills diminish. You still have to have them. Otherwise, people don't take you serious. Like, what do you know?
What do you know?
That's a fair question. You know, I mean, and most people don't go through and get a master's degree in geology and learn a heck of a lot about leadership skills. That's not what happens. So a trick is played on us, especially in the consulting realm, that sounds like this. Hey, no one told me I was ever going to have to talk to clients. I thought I was going to talk to rocks. And then no one ever told me that I had to lead teams because rocks don't care. And so as you move through time, that's a really dangerous trick. And the earlier you realize that in your career, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
That's a great segue to my next question because, you mentioned earlier having to earn the trust of the people. Like, what is this clown going to teach me? What does he know about the work that I do? And leadership is cross-cutting. It is, you don't have to have the technical skills to be a good leader. I know when I've been trying to promote myself as a business consultant and I've worked with architects and manufacturing, some of the people who come to the training, their first question is, what do you know about architecture? So how can you be here to teach me leadership? And so I'm sure you've run into the same thing. So what is your take on that pushback? And, you don't have an environmental degree. You don't have 10 years of experience in ESG. How are you here to teach me this training?
Yeah, fair point. So my master's degree is in sustainability, but I know you're not picking on me. But let me give you sort of the worst example that I've ever seen. And there was a true story. It's a guy who literally sold the Brooklyn Bridge. And when they tore down the old Brooklyn Bridge, there was all these wood splinters and ties and, whatever, laying in the side of the road. And he's driving by, happens to be from that particular part of the country. He's driving by and he says to the construction people, hey, do you mind if I throw some of that in the back of my pickup truck? I said, sure, it's going to get hauled away in a couple of days anyway. Who cares? He said, that's the Brooklyn Bridge, right? Yeah. So he throws it in the back. And he took little tiny white cards and he splintered all the wood down to like toothpick size, glued it on there with a picture of the Brooklyn Bridge and said, you can now own part of the Brooklyn Bridge. And he sold hundreds and thousands of these darn things. And so he comes to this discussion and he's talking about his great idea to sell the Brooklyn Bridge, which seems like, part of the end of a joke, right?
Right.
And to prove his legitimacy, he shows us his bank account. And I was mortified that somebody could be that arrogant to not only say, this is what I did, but here's my bank account to prove it. And so, Laura, to your question, please don't do that. Don't show anybody your bank account. Don't walk up there with your degree pasted on your shirt. Don't say, I'm the PhD, I wrote this book, blah, 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 blah. How we suggest you do it is with stories and examples. And Laura, you've seen this happen. As you take the stage, as you start talking about the content, you will start to weave in examples from firms like theirs. So if I'm in front of an AECOM, I'm going to talk about WSP. If I'm in front of ERM, I'm going to talk about SLR or Environ or the wide variety of firms out there, because that tells them, oh, this person is an insider in the industry without wearing a master's degree or whatever the case is, or God help us, showing a bank account.
So, okay. I have to know this. I was going to ask it at some point anyway. So you have to have some really big bombs that you've seen, like people who have gone through these things, maybe their first time up and it hasn't worked out. You've got to have a story.
Yeah. So I don't know when this happened, but I suspect it was during sort of the Iraq, Afghanistan incursions. Everybody I met that was a big tough guy, suddenly that person was a Navy SEAL. I don't know where that
Right.
came from, but all of a
Right.
sudden it's like, what? How many
Yeah.
SEALs could there possibly be? And I'm meeting all these SEALs all over the place. And of course, you don't want to ask them. I was like, really? You got a card or something? I don't know. So
Right.
there was this one particularly big dude, and he had tattoos and everything, and he was a marine biologist by training and a SEAL, allegedly. And we go through, and we're in the fourth session, and it's intense. You're up on stage and all that kind of stuff. So here's this alleged Navy SEAL, tats all over the place, got to be 250, big, good looking, strong dude. And he's up there presenting to his whole peer group of sort of, engineering, biologist people. And Nic, he completely lost it and broke down in tears. I mean, he completely lost it under the pressure of peer review. And I had to come up on stage. I mean, I came up on stage and said, hey, man, it's okay. Let's back up just a second. And I don't know what happened in that moment, but that was a bomb that I will never, ever forget, because I was tricked into this feeling of, oh, this guy's going to kill it. My God, he's been in war zones. I mean, he must be the man. And and he's in front of a group just talking about his practice and lost it. So that was one of my career moments when I said, are you doing the right things here? Are you, or have you psychologically ruined this person? You do have to ask that question every once in a while. And we're friends to this day. And he said that was a seminal moment in his career. And he gives amazing presentations today. And I found out he wasn't a SEAL. He was what they call a JAG. And it's basically an attorney in the Navy. And he was deployed with the SEALs to go out and make sure they're not doing things they shouldn't be doing. So that was his role, but he sort of passed himself off differently.
Yeah, of course. That's wow. Yeah, that's good.
That's an incredible story. You hear about certain musicians or people you see on stage and they look like they're killing it, but then you find out they barf every time they perform. To get through that.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, one of the comics with Bo Burnham, a good example of that. He had social anxiety. He had a really hard time. He quit stand-up for 5 years, even though he was great at it. Yeah,
just because he couldn't handle the stage.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Yeah. One of the things we teach is you don't want that to go away. And maybe it's the same in stand-up. People say, how do I get rid of the butterflies? Well, you don't want to get rid of the butterflies. You want to harness the butterflies, because the minute you step up there and say, I got this, it's the 50th time I've given this presentation, blah, 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 you will be flat. Your brain won't work at the level it is. You're not going to get the laughs. They can feel that in the room that, Nic doesn't care about tonight, man. He's getting the door money and a beer, and that's it. That kind of thing. You don't want that. You want to harness butterflies, not eliminate them.
Yeah. Man, that's good. I like that. That's totally true. I mean, heck, I've even had that happen fairly recently, where you're like, oh, why am I? Oh, I didn't care. I thought I had it in the bag. That's why I'm coming off kind of, I got to be better at this, Yeah, it's totally true. Totally true.
Yeah. And I think in the careers of consulting, that manifests itself as maybe not being on stage all the time or telling jokes or whatever, but it probably manifests itself in trying things, other practices, projects that are just outside your comfort zone. Like, oh man, I don't really know that. Great. That's the moment when you're on the bleeding edge and you should have some butterflies. And if you can sustain that through a career, you'll be energized, you'll be animated. People can kind of feel that. And we live in a world within the STEM community that they're really sort of conflict adverse. They're not risk takers by nature in a sort of a broad brush. And I'm suggesting do the opposite. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you have no engineering degree and you're a biologist that you start designing bridges. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting that, go back to your Venn diagram, something that's relatively close. Just stretch yourself a wee bit. That's it.
Yeah, I like that. And considering other career advice, you mentioned early on how you even got involved with ECG was that you had this connection that you just held on to and didn't know you were going to leverage later on. And I have another friend here in Syracuse who teaches networking about the power of loose ties. And that's sort of how we met as well. I was volunteering with NAEP and was running the webinars, and that's how you caught my name. So, what have you seen, or just advice that you have for career, or not, I guess, career climbers, career seekers, people who want to move up, and the importance of networking and get involved and getting over the jitters and doing things?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, in people firms like consulting it's everything. Imagine you work for SpaceX and you're an amazing engineer, and you're the one that's designing the next, version of the rocket that's going to take us to Mars or whatever the case is. You're, no pun intended, you're in rare air. There's not a lot of people that are going to mess with you, whatever the case is, that people are trying to network with you. That's not the world of consulting. There is always going to be somebody who knows just a little bit more about that bridge or that design or that, Eldar rule or whatever. There's always going to be that person. So your reliance on building an incredibly strong network is tantamount to your career. The most important thing that we teach people in terms of networking is what is being said about you in rooms you're not in.
Yeah.
What is that? And it turns out that if you allow the narrative just to be sort of by accident, Laura's really great at this and she really likes people. Well, that's not the narrative that maybe Laura wants. Laura wants to be known as a brilliant this and a real driver of teams and right. An amazing project manager. Well, guess what? That narrative is on you to create. Correct. You're the person that creates the narrative in the firm. And when you're not there, you need somebody like Nic or another cohort to say, no, Laura's great at project management. But you don't allow Nic to dream that up himself. You drive that narrative. You build that network out. And the more times that network can speak to you and about you when you're not there, the more powerful it is. Because if I ask Laura, hey, what do you like to be known of? Of course she's going to say, I want to be known as a great project manager. Well, yeah, but I'm not asking her. I'm asking the other people around because I want her on my project. It's like getting, references, if you will, but you're creating an army of references out there for your particular career moves and the kinds of things that you want to do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. And and it's so true. It's so true.
Sitting there thinking, like, what are people going to say about me?
No. I already know. I'm like, how do I get them to stop saying I'm hilarious? No, okay.
But see, Nic, it's the same, right? So if somebody asks, hey, I found this guy on YouTube or whatever, I saw a couple jokes, whatever. What do you think about him? And if that person says to the person who wants to hire you, oh my God, he kills it. Oh, well, you're going to get hired. Yeah. But if it's left, I've seen him a couple times,
Right.
That's right. You can't allow that to happen. And, that bleeds a little bit into the sort of the political game again, with STEM people traditionally don't like to play it. And I totally get that. I get the mindset, but in a people organization of which many of you, if not all of you, are in, you don't have the choice to not play politics. It's being played. So your choices are play it, or it's played on you. Those are your two choices. There's no stepping away from it, because you step away. And I'm not saying in a crossing ethical boundaries or some moral BS. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm saying the connections that you make, the right people, the right projects that you're on, what you're known for, the narrative about you. That kind of politics is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that as a discussion point. I think so many people think that it's just, it's not for me. It's not my game. I don't want to do that. I don't like, playing the game, quote unquote. I'm like you said, it's happening, whether you want it to be or not. And it doesn't matter what company, where you are, they are all doing it. And
absolutely.
You say, if you're not engaged, then you're not involved.
Absolutely. And I'll give you 2 warning signs for when politics crank up and you better be in the game. Those of you who are involved in venture capital deals where there's, a 3 to 5 year turn and you get new partners every 3 to 5 years, right before a deal, politics goes bananas because everybody's jockeying for position, who our owner's going to be and, what they're doing their due diligence and who's doing what, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then right after a deal, because traditionally there's an infusion of capital and that capital has to be used in the business in some particular way. So potentially tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars are flowing into the firm. It's like, well, who's going to get that? Yeah. Well, I want control over the budget because that means I'm going to be able to hire people, open offices, fill in white spaces geographically, open new practices, et cetera. Those are the two times leading up to the deal and in the funding session right after the deal. Man, you better have your political hat tight because that's the time you get left behind.
Yeah. And heck, I've seen it in many different places, in many different ways. And even learning sometimes the politics of an organization may not line up with your goals. And the sooner you realize that, the better off you are somewhere else. And, otherwise you're stuck there and you're going to be doing the same thing 10 years from now. And
absolutely. Yeah. Or option B, get yourself into leadership situations so that you can affect the politics and the overall drive of the firm that you've grown up in love. Change it. I mean, it's a people organization, right? There's nothing stamped in iron. Just change the culture, the drive, what you're going to focus on. We've seen that again and again. Don't get apathetic about, this is not for me because, they're going in the wrong direction. Try to change it first. If you're too low on the totem pole or you just can't get that done, then fine. Then find some place that does align with your goals.
Oh, yeah. Super well said. And it's a great time for us to segue because we're closing in on the end of our time, which is disappointing. I think we could talk to you for another hour here pretty easily. But we do love to do a segment we call Field Notes, right? Where it's part of the show where we ask our guests to share memorable moments about the work they do. So we also encourage our listeners to share stories using the hashtag Field Notes so we can read those on future episodes. But we want to ask you, tell us about the first visit to U.S. Steel in India. How did that
go? I'm glad most of these people have retired because I think the liability is now off, the limitations. So it's my first day on site and I had no idea what I was doing. And we were designing scaffold for a U.S. Steel shutdown. They were doing a big maintenance project, blah, blah, blah. And some of these scaffolds can be 3-4 stories tall. And, I was a kid. I was 23, 24 years old. And so my mom buys me my first work shoes. I go to U.S. Steel. I'm in a suit. I talk about your tie comment before. I'm in a white shirt and a suit and these goofy shoes my mom bought me. And now I'm climbing through scaffold. And already these project managers are looking at me like, come on, man. They've got busted up red wings and steel toes and everything. And I've got, I think they're JCPenney shoes or whatever. So I'm wandering around. And remember, we're building scaffold and I'm 3 stories up. And this is a long time before health and safety was taken very seriously. And there's people down below, welders and things, welding plates and all kinds of stuff. And I managed with these goofy shoes to kick off a 7-foot piece of scaffolding pipe that was just laying there from 3 stories up.
No.
And this place is mostly dark with just work lights around. And so I froze because I didn't know, what do I yell? Heads up? Do I yell, oh my God?
Yeah.
But the pipe starts clamoring, hitting the scaffold and went, bang, 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 bang. And from there, nothing but F-bombs flew through that place.
Oh, of course.
And it was the first and last visit to U.S. Steel they ever took me on. And I think I threw the shoes away the next day. Miraculously, no one died as far as I know.
Oh, my gosh.
And it was horrifying. That was day one.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is so embarrassing.
Yeah.
The loudest thing you've ever heard in your life. Yeah.
This is why we share these things, though, because, someone else listening is like, I had an embarrassing moment or their embarrassing moment is yet to come because we all have one.
Or it's like, okay, well, I have an embarrassing moment, but it's not nearly as bad as Mike. So that's, thank God. I feel better.
I actually called my mom and, on the way home and I complained about the shoes.
Yeah. Oh man.
Like it was her fault. I had to find somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Mom, these shoes you got me,
shoes.
they made me kick something. Yeah. Right.
They're very dangerous, Mom.
Yeah. Come on.
Oh, that's great. All right, we are getting close to the time, but I did want to mention, I've known you for several years now. I love doing this, and I love inviting when we have people on that we do know, because I always learn something new about them. I didn't know you were a kiteboarder.
Oh my God. Yeah. So, I live in Florida most of the time, and we have hurricanes, and I like to go down to the beach sometimes during those events, not during the hurricane, but when the wind is starting to pick up, and just check out things, what's going on here, and put their boats away and stuff. And this is about 7-8 years ago. I saw these 2 massive kites just ripping past the beach. And I thought, oh my God, they're out in a hurricane. That looks amazingly dangerous. I have to try that. And so I chased these 2 down the beach, and they finally got off, and I asked them all these questions, and there's only 1 or 2 kite shops back in the day of that. And they said, you didn't take lessons and all that kind of stuff. So I did. And living in Florida gives you lots of opportunities. So now my wife, Kim, and I, wherever we are in the world, we are chasing wind all over the place. And it's just an amazing sport. And surprisingly very soft on your body. Like, it looks violent, and you see these horrible things on YouTube. But once you sort of get it, it's very soft. It pulls from your waist. And it's just one of those things that erases your mind. You are totally in the moment when that happens. I hear people talk about like surfing and skydiving, the same thing. It is therapy beyond belief.
That's so cool. Like I don't know if you know, I can wakeboard, but I have never tried kite surfing.
Well, there you go. We will strap you to a kite the next time you're down.
I would love it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Make sure it's during a storm, though. Maybe not a hurricane, but like it's a good storm, Really, really raise the hair on the back of the neck.
Right.
Well, Mike, we are running out of time. And before we do, is there anything you'd like us to talk about that we haven't mentioned today?
I think when people get involved in their careers, they have this sense of this is how it should go. I should be moving in this direction, and I should be learning more about this, and I should be getting my PE and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. You know what? That's not the way it's going to go. The way it's going to go is it's going to be market driven. It's going to be firm driven, and it's going to be the people you surround yourself with driven. Mm-hmm. And make sure you're making good choices about those, because that's going to be the major drivers in your career. And you know what? It's okay that it didn't go exactly the way you want it to go. It's going to be amazing. And if you go all in with those concepts, you'll have an incredible career. Rarely do you meet somebody in their 60s and 70s and say, yeah, my career went exactly the way it went. That's not going to happen. So don't put that stuff on just be open to ideas, stretch yourself a little bit, scare yourself every once in a while, and you'll be amazing.
Oh, great advice. And last but not least, where can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
ecgpc.com is our website, and it's a mess, but it's like many of your firms, it's a merger. So ecgpc.com is the website, and you can reach out to us and see all kinds of stuff, and maybe we'll have you in a session someday.
There we go. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. It's been fun. Appreciate it.
That's our show. Thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Bye. See you, everybody.